Greetings, good people of this world. As we enter the final weeks of 2017, we can look back at what has been an epic year for crypto. Bitcoin broke through the $1,000 barrier for the first time since the Mt. Gox crash in 2013, and has since smashed through every price barrier in its meteoric rise to beyond $10,000. But Bitcoin is not alone in its claim to meteoric returns. The 2017 craze of ICOs has created more cryptocurrencies and altcoins than there are Bertie Bott's beans, most which can also boast returns of at least 1,000% for the earliest investors. Rather than dwell in the past, let us turn our attention instead to the future. Beyond the futures listings by Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CBOE, and other institutions, there lies an event on the near horizon in 2018 that is potentially, in my opinion, more exciting and in the long term, hopefully more significant for Bitcoin and the crypto community. I'm the White Paper Wise One, and today I want to tell you about COTI, a platform that has the potential to provide the next major real-world advance for cryptocurrencies. COTI, the currency of the internet, is so much more than a currency. It is the most revolutionary payment platform ever devised. In fact, as a currency, XCT, native of the COTI platform, is in my opinion pretty average. But the payment system is incredible. It's brilliant. Actually, before we proceed, some aspects should not be left uncriticized. To the COTI team, if you are seeing this, you need to retract and redo the COTI overview document and the website, or at least the opening pages of those items. Leaving them as they are will hinder adoption of COTI rather than promote it. If it were not for my perseverance and reading over the entire overview and white paper, I would have dismissed it by page 3 as another arbitrary altcoin with hopeless ambition of global domination in an already saturated market, with competing coins like Bitcoin having had 9 years head start over it. Other individuals will not have the tenacity I did. In the first 10 pages of this overview, the real value of COTI is only hinted at briefly around page 5. For most of the rest of the time, problems regarding Bitcoin are elaborated in their discussion. The problem with this approach, as I'm reading through it, I'm reading all the problems with Bitcoin which are repeatedly criticized in various ICOs that have come to light over the past year. Scalability and speed of transactions always are two of the major factors that are listed. And if you want to address these situations, there are numerous coins that already exist for this sole purpose. Dash and Litecoin, for example, both produce options with better speed and scalability. So my mind is subconsciously like refuting the argument presented here by COTI because you're basing everything on Bitcoin. And at some point you even specified and made mention of the fact that while there are other currencies, on the following page with objectives, throughout the section, references to digital currencies are to be taken as a reference to Bitcoin, while COTI acknowledges that characteristics of alternative digital currencies vary widely. So when reading that statement, already I'm discrediting a large portion of the argument presented by COTI. I'm discrediting it because when I look at the main problems they list with Bitcoin, scalability and speed, which we've mentioned already. As for legality, volatility, complexity, these are going to be aspects which are going to apply to most cryptocurrencies. As for the immutability, that's one of the greatest things about Bitcoin. And while I understand COTI's point of view that it hinders the ability to have a method of consumer protection, it is a very crucial aspect to the currency itself. The complexity issue is stated by a couple of other ICOs in recent times, and I personally feel it's often overstated. I do not think Bitcoin is actually particularly complicated. I think most people are able to grasp at least the basics very easily, and with a little bit of reading, one can educate oneself further. So that's an inflated criticism of Bitcoin, in my opinion. So as I'm reading through these points, I'm constantly thinking that there's already an alternative out there for it. There's no need for COTI. The most important service COTI provides is highlighted in this paragraph here. Bitcoin and its peers can, in their current form, serve as cryptographically secure cache layers, but in order to cross the chasm and become widely used in day-to-day payments, digital currencies will need to be extended to offer the consumer and merchant protections that are now commonplace in the payments industry. For example, the major card networks allow for the correcting of billing errors, the reversal of unauthorized charges, and issuance of refunds to purchasers who do not receive the goods or services that they paid for. Each of these provisions serve to instill greater peace of mind in consumer and merchants, driving their adoption or continued participation in existing payment networks. So that right there is the greatest selling point for this COTI platform, yet it's only down here on page 7, and it waffles on a bit more before actually getting down into how it proposes to address the current issues. Whereas one needs to consider when trying to market oneself, the mass psychology of people, and if you were not under a rock during this year's ongoing saga about the scalability issue Bitcoin faces, people become more passionately devoted to their chosen cryptocurrency than their religion most of the time. I mean, we've basically got two religious cults on the Bitcoin's arguments at the moment for cash versus the legacy versions of the coin. And you trying to now introduce a completely new cryptocurrency, people have already found their devotion in this sphere. So what you're wanting to do is offer them a platform through which they can use their devotion and redirect it in this platform you're providing. So instead of marketing COTI as a currency for the internet age or the digital age, a digital currency built for payments, it should rather be a payment system built for digital currencies. You would gain so much more adoption if your target market was people who have already adopted cryptocurrency but are facing challenges when trying to use it for real-world applications. Similarly, for merchants who want to be paid in digital currencies but face problems because of the ones mentioned, such as volatility, you now come as the solution to both sides of the predicament. And as such, you gain far more appreciation from all parties because you appeal to the people who are favorable towards Litecoin. You appeal to the people who are favorable towards Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Dash, whatever. If they see a platform that enhances their usability of their preferred coin, you will gain further adoption. By trying to come across as a completely new currency, is going to fall on deaf ears because people have predetermined minds and their decisions are already made for the most part. And it takes a lot of reconvincing to go beyond that. So in terms of marketing, COTI should really be focusing on compatibility with other cryptocurrencies and other fiat currencies for that matter, as the platform proposes to do. So I don't know what the marketing team for COTI is doing, but quite frankly, in my opinion, COTI, as it currently is the currency of internet, should be currencies of the internet, as it serves to facilitate any cryptocurrency or fiat currency and make payments with them possible, which is a hugely valuable proposition in the age we're moving into. In my opinion, the technical white paper actually gives the best description of this fact in the abstract. A payment system for managing and pricing trade risk between online pseudonymous parties would unlock trade opportunities that currently fail to manifest due to untrusting nature of electronic commerce. We propose a distributed trust metric derived from an automated analysis of an open transaction network's activity to provide a predictive behavior-based risk assessment that appropriately prices trade risk and self-learns. Accurate pricing of the trade risk informs fee pricing to supply sustainable amounts of credit for instant settlement and funding of dispute arbitration by the network. To avoid a trust-dependent arbitration scheme, we present a decentralized mediation system that relies on staking coordination game among incommunicable profit-seeking mediators. The trust metric further serves to inform individual transactions fee pricing so as to require high-risk transactions to fund the costs of absorbing losses as a result of negative payment outcomes. This incentivizes honest behavior, rewarding low-risk users with little to no free requirements. This minimizes overall transaction costs over time. So this is a fantastic idea. To give a kind of idea of what they've proposed here is a system where you can pay for, it allows for the payment of purchases into an escrow account. So the buyer pays for an item or a service, but the merchant doesn't receive the payment until both parties have accepted the trade. So once the buyers receive the item, then their signature, cryptographically secure signature, will be the one key while the merchants will be the other, and that will then release the funds to the merchant. Now, what this does is it enables a period in which the funds are locked up in case there is any problem with the purchase prior to it arriving at the buyer. This is obviously in the context of an internet age where purchases are frequently made online, and then there's a delivery period before the buyer actually receives what they've paid for. Now, the problem with Bitcoin in this regard is that once you've made a Bitcoin payment, it's finalized. There's no way to retract the payment. Now, that's a very secure way that the Bitcoin network handles that, but it does provide the problem that they've mentioned here in COTI, and the whole purpose for this system is that it hinders the ability to actually use it if you are uncertain about what you're going to be receiving, because there's no way to get your Bitcoin back once that's happened. Whereas what COTI is doing is they're providing a system where you pay the system and then you wait for your goods to return to you that you've purchased. And once you've received them, the system then releases the payment to the merchant. If you don't receive the goods in the condition that you expect them to, you can initiate what they call their mediation process. And then that's a process whereby mediators who cannot and do not know who one another are assess the situation in real world, and then they vote as to which side of the purchase is at fault. They'll vote for either the buyer being at fault or the merchant being at fault of any disputes, and the party at fault basically carries the cost of the fees required to pay the mediators. So the whole system essentially hinges very much on the mediation, and I think the whole mediation process is going to necessitate a separate video, because it isn't a very straightforward process. But in simplicity, it's analogous to the Bitcoin mining system, whereas instead of miners verifying the Bitcoin blockchain transactions, you've got mediators verifying the transaction process, in this instance ensuring that both merchants and buyer have upheld their end of the transaction agreement. They only come into play if there is a dispute. So if a buyer receives goods that are not in appropriate condition, they can lodge a dispute, and then a number N mediators will then vote on the situation after having reviewed what data is available. Now, on this regard, there could be a bit more information. What was provided in the white paper discusses in fair detail the concept, but the real world application is quite vague. They do mention that you're going to have to be on site for the mediation process, and in order to be able to, I imagine, arrive at a location and observe the nature in which the goods or whatever were received. The one criticism I have of this process in the proposal put forward here by COTI is very little mention was made to the whole shipping and transportation of goods. And in reality, this is often a service provided by third parties. So in reality, you've got a transaction happening, in essence, between the merchant and a transporting company, and a second transaction happening between the transporting company and the end buyer. Now, the end buyer bought it directly through the merchant, but has received the good through an intermediary third person. And that person hasn't really been mentioned in the COTI proposal throughout the white paper or the overview document. And is an issue that I think deserves a little bit more discussion, especially because it is a liability for penalizing the merchants if the shipment wasn't conducted appropriately, and then the merchant is at a loss when they were in fact not to blame. And the blame comes in quite a cool system that they've proposed, with COTI, of a trust score. And this makes use of some upcoming technology algorithms, not too dissimilar to the Google algorithm used to decide on which pages to show. So COTI is proposing a not too dissimilar trust scoring engine. Okay, the white paper goes into quite a lot of detail about the mathematics behind how their trust algorithm works. But essentially, the system they propose evaluates all users and gives them a trust score based mostly on previous transactions that they've made and whether or not they've lost disputes. And this gives them a score ranging from 0 to 1, essentially 0% to 100%, 100% being an impeccable record and completely trustworthy. If you are completely trustworthy, you pay 0 fees, essentially, to use the COTI system. The less trustworthy you are, the higher the fees you have to pay for using the system. And the reason for this is it basically is an automated way of calculating the risk and making the system as efficient as it possibly can and covering the potential risks of parties failing to hold up their end of the bargain. And then the COTI platform will reimburse the affected party that was essentially cheated out in the transaction. So this system is brilliant because it's going to provide merchants with a means to both accept digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, without having to be concerned about double spendings before there's confirmation. So this simultaneously addresses a whole number of issues. It addresses volatility concerns that merchants have. It addresses the double spending concerns merchants have. And essentially the COTI system is taking it upon themselves to accept the onus of that responsibility and the risk of that. And their system is going to make it far more accessible for everyone, merchants and buyers, to use their cryptocurrencies for real-world purposes. Now, how this trust scoring thing works is it reduces fees, but if there is a dispute and you've got to use a mediator, the mediating system is essentially a proof of stake system whereby the mediator will stake down a certain amount of their COTI coins, and then if all the mediators vote in consensus, that decision is then used to reward all the COTI members, all the COTI mediators that voted appropriately. The people who voted against the consensus then are not rewarded for the mediation process. So you kind of stake 10 COTI, for example, and you vote in favor of the buyer being in the right of the transaction dispute. And if all the other if the majority, a supermajority I think is what they specify, if the supermajority of the other mediators vote in the same manner as you, then the decision of the platform will be in favor of the buyer, and the mediators who voted as such are then rewarded for betting appropriately in what is regarded as the fairest way. So it's a very clever system because anyone can be a mediator, the same way anyone can be a Bitcoin miner. So you're going to have mediators everywhere in the world that will facilitate this process. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I think it's a very exciting prospect, because you can now, through buying COTI, you can then stake and increase your holdings in COTI by contributing to the platform in the mediation process. So in summary, the COTI system allocates trust scores to determine the fees, and the displayed price for users will be the cost of the product plus the cost of the fee. Now, the fee you'll have to pay will be negligible to non-existent if you have a high trust score. And if you don't have a high trust score, the price you will be seeing will just be a slightly inflated price to what it would be otherwise. And you can constantly work to improve your trust score should it be reduced for a failed dispute. They also discuss this reserve credit fund fee. This is only relevant to merchants who want to have access to payments immediately and are not prepared to wait for payments to come through after both parties have agreed to the transaction being legitimate. So in instances where delivery is awaiting or pending delivery, arrival of delivery to the customer, if the merchant wants access to the funds paid in the interim, there's a reserve credit fund fee for that purpose, so that people have access to the money now, but if they're prepared to wait, then they don't have to pay those fees. So it's all a very well thought out system, and I see it as a very exciting prospect for 2018, enabling far greater applications for the use of cryptocurrency. And so I'm looking forward to getting my hands on some of the COTI currency for the purpose of being a mediator for local disputes, because then you can get more of the currency and stake more, and you can always trade out into other cryptocurrencies with the COTI currency. So very exciting, and I hope others are as excited about it as I am. Having said that, I do anticipate there being a number of controversial issues arising with the whole mediation process, especially when there is not an obvious right or wrong in terms of who's at fault for the disputes and how mediation is going to perform in the real world. I find a very intriguing prospect that I'm looking forward to. While it is a complex system, it provides users anywhere in the world with a monetized incentive to facilitate this mediation process. And this whole platform the mediation process is pivotal to this whole platform's operations. And that I see as a bit of a hurdle for the platform, because it requires a lot of mediators, and they are going to have to be distributed globally in order for the system to work effectively. But I think if they can achieve the right marketing for this, and then it's going to be, while a complicated process, I think the best approach to resolving the issues faced with the use of cryptocurrencies and other digital formats for payments in remote locations where you're not necessarily in direct contact with the merchants you're purchasing items from in the modern day world of ordering on the internet. So yeah, exciting prospects for the future. I hope your futures bring good fortune to you, and that'll be all from me. Cheers.